Hello there, welcome back to my channel, where today I'm going to be talking about if I had to declutter one palette from each brand in my collection, which palette would that be? Now this is getting to be a harder and harder process because I am constantly curating my collection to be something that really brings me joy. And so it used to be really easy to say, oh, I'm not using this palette, pass it on. That's not where I am now. Now almost every palette in my collection is something which gets me really excited. So this is getting to be quite a difficult thing to do. If you're new to my channel, hey, my name is Rachel. I'm a homeschooling stay-at-home mom. I love to play with colorful eyeshadow. I did film this look and I'll link it down below in the description box if you're interested. I upload usually at least 3 videos a week, sometimes more, all kinds of eyeshadow related content. So if you are interested in seeing lots of colorful stuff on your timeline, I hope you consider liking and subscribing. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to start off with BH Cosmetics. Now, BH Cosmetics, they were recently taken over by Makeup Revolution. Right before they were taken over, they had perfected their formula. They brought it to a point where all of their eyeshadows were such good quality, and then they just dropped away. And we're like, no! They did recently do a sneak peek that they are going to be releasing some new travel series palettes, and so that's really exciting. Everyone's just kind of waiting on tenterhooks to see if it's still the great BH quality that we know and love. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do. But if I had to declutter one BH palette that's in my collection, I would declutter the Peridot palette. This is the Birthstone from August. I actually really like this palette. I recently did a video, which is probably live by the time you're seeing this, where I compared this palette to the Lush Life palette from Colourpop. I did an eye look using each palette, and the eye looks turned out almost the same. At the end, I liked this palette's eye look better because this shimmer was brighter than the shimmer that I used in the Lush Life palette. So I really like this palette. Currently, it's still in my collection. That may change because I do have Lush Life and I also really like Lush Life. It's a little bit deeper and a little bit more jewel toned, less bright than this one, but it has more colors as well. So there's a bit more of a selection over there. However, this is amazing quality and I love this yellow right here, and then it's one of my best, it's like my second best lime green shimmer. It's a great palette, but the reason I chose it for today's video is because it is so close to Lush Life, I may end up decluttering it anyway. The next brand I'll talk about is Utenzi. I actually have several Utenzi palettes and I love all of them. I have thought about decluttering this one along with the other mini palette that I have. This is the Mini Ocean and I also have the Mini Forest. The reason I've thought about decluttering these two is because they're smaller and I prefer slightly larger eyeshadow palettes. However, they're really great quality, as all Utenzi is, and I like the color selection as well. So I've decided to keep them and just try to remind myself to use them. The reason I selected Ocean instead of Forest for today's video is because Ocean has these two blues, and I have several different great blue options within my collection, and this dark blue is not one that I really use. I tend to stay away from the dark blues and purples unless it's just an outer corner, but this one's more of a satiny kind of formula. It's not a full matte, it's not a full shimmer, it's somewhere in the middle. And so I just don't really use this one except a little bit of a transition from a light or medium tone shimmer over into a dark matte. I don't know, it's not my favorite Utenzi formula, and so these two shadows, they're represented elsewhere. And then these two are quite pretty, but they're within my collection, they're not super unique. I have a couple palettes that have light purpley shimmers, including other palettes from Utenzi, like the Sol Mone 2 eyeshadow palette has a couple really pretty purpley shimmers. Over here we've got a nice orange and brown. It's just, I like the palette, it's good color story, but I do feel that these colors are pretty well represented elsewhere within my collection, so I would feel more comfortable passing this one along. Now let's talk about Ace Beauté. Within the Ace Beauté collection, I have Flare, Oceanic, and Paradise Fallen. And if I had to get rid of one, I would choose Paradise Fallen because I love this color story. It's a cool toned purple, as you can see. But when I use it, I'm actually quite disappointed in these two shimmers. This is called Twilight and this is Night Sky. Maybe my problem is that I'm comparing the shimmers to Glamlight, Beauty Bay, Utenzi, even some Colourpop shimmers. Utenzi is one of my favorites. Glamlight and Beauty Bay are a little bit lower, but they're still really good. They're more creamy, putty sort of shimmer. Even Colourpop's good shimmers are really nice. These I found to be rather disappointing. It's not that they didn't have pigment. They did have pigment, and by the way, this is the new formula. They did have pigment, but they just weren't very poppy. Like, at least on my skin tone, they didn't really stand out as anything particularly unique. I'm happy to use this palette and just grab shimmers from somewhere else. Like, these shimmers are fine, but the two purple shimmers, you know, the ones that make me think of the palette, not super exciting. So I like this palette and I do plan on keeping it, but if I had to declutter one from Ace Beauté, it'd be this one. Okay, I own one palette from Melt Cosmetics and I never plan ever on getting rid of this palette, but if I had to declutter one from each brand, it would have to be the Melt Amori Mariposas palette because it's the only one that I have from Melt. I love this palette. I would be truly sad to not have this palette anymore. It's so beautiful. I love the color story. I love the variety of shades and depths and warm versus cool. The shimmers are spectacular. This is a gorgeous palette. My friend recently took advantage of Melt's 60% off sale for this collection, and she's like, oh my word, I totally get what you guys are saying about the quality of this palette. It's amazing. Now I know Melt has sometimes released things which weren't so great. Universally, this palette is loved, and I understand why. It's fabulous. I just think it's beautiful. So if I had to declutter one palette from each collection, I would have to declutter this one, but it's not gonna happen. There are a good range of Colourpop palettes represented throughout my collection. I started with Colourpop. It was kind of my first love when it came to eyeshadow because I just landed in a brand that produced really good quality eyeshadows. So I started off with a lot of Colourpop. I bought too much. I was kind of buying palettes that were recommended by other people because I liked how they looked on those other people, and that didn't necessarily translate to my own skin tone. So there were some palettes I bought that looked amazing on someone else and not as great on me. And that was just part of the process of learning my own skin, my own styles, my own preferences. Now my Colourpop shadow collection is definitely more curated to my current style, but if I had to get rid of one, it would be the All Amethyst palette. I just bought this. I knew that it was a bit of a risk because it had gotten some mixed reviews. I love this color story. Again, a cool toned purple color story. It's beautiful. I think it's unique. We've got some purple tones that are expected, but then we have this one here that it looks a little bit greenish, brownish purple in the pan. It's like a very, very deep mauvey sort of color. And then we have this amulet shade here, which is a beautiful, bright, sort of like a deep periwinkle kind of shimmer. It's a beautiful color. We've got a decent range of mid-tones, one slightly deeper shade, and then a couple different formulas. Over here is a sequin formula, so it's the matte with shimmers. And then we have 4 actual shimmers and then 4 mattes. I love this color story. I really want to love this palette. I've tried it once so far and I was like, oh, okay. Like the look turned out very pretty. It was a super soft, romantic, just a gentle sort of purple eyeshadow look. It wasn't bright and bold and dynamic. So if that's the kind of look that you like, then this palette might be a really good fit for you. I just found that it wasn't the best Colourpop quality that I've known, and Colourpop generally, great quality. So this one I think didn't quite hit the mark. I'm really, really disappointed because I love the color story. I am going to try it again. Maybe I can get a better look with a different technique or combining different shades. I don't know. But if I had to get rid of one from Colourpop, it'd be All Amethyst. Now, if I had to choose a palette from my Glamlight collection, there were only 2. I only own 2 Glamlight palettes. I own Dirty Martini and the Michaela palette. And Dirty Martini is my favorite green palette, so sorry, Michaela. I mean, it's a great palette, but Dirty Martini's my preference. These 2 rows up here, okay, first off, there's a lot going on here. I like the color story. I like the formula. Glamlight's formula is really good. These 2 rows for me almost never get used. I'm not really into neutrals. I very, very rarely do a neutral look. And then this row is kind of peachy with some bronze and interesting goldy shades here, but these shades are represented elsewhere in my collection as well. So when I dip into this palette, it's pretty much these bottom 3 rows, which are very purple heavy, and these are nice purples. The other 2 palettes that I talked about that I would get rid of, Amethyst and Paradise Fallen, I would say that these purples are better than both of those. And then I've got a couple blues, but nothing too deep. And then we've got these greens and yellows, and the blue works with the greens, the yellow works with the greens, the yellow works with the blue. I really like these bottom 3 rows. I think they're really nice, and I use them whenever I'm in this palette. Those are the ones I go for. But I would be happier to part ways with this palette than with the Dirty Martini, because Dirty Martini is currently my favorite green palette. I love it. I love the shadows and the performance. I love the way that you can build and you can choose different shimmers, and it's a green monochromatic palette, but it's got some unexpected twists. You know, you have more orangey, lemony sorts of green kind of shadows, and then you have a couple of bluish shadows. They all work together. It's still definitely a green palette. It's my favorite one. So if I had to get rid of one from Glamlight, it'd be the Michaela palette, even though I do like this palette. And finally, Beauty Bay, the last brand represented within my little collection of eyeshadow. I have Wilderness, Love Notes, and Age of Opulence, and I would definitely get rid of Love Notes. In fact, I have this currently listed on Mercari and Poshmark because I really like this palette. I think it's beautiful. It's a lovely pink and purple color story. All of the shimmers are unique. I think that this palette is a bit redundant. If you've watched any of my videos where I'm talking about this palette, you'll know I think it's a bit redundant. I don't think we needed both of these shades. I think this diagonal row could be pared down to 2. I think these 4 pinks right here, again, could be pared down. It could have been done in a smaller version, and I really like the formula. I like the palette itself. I like how we go from light to dark, and there's a nice range of shades and colors, light, medium, dark, shimmers, and mattes. It's a good palette, but I don't usually reach just for this one. I might go into it if I just need a lavender or I want like a champagne pink shimmer, then this is the one I reach for. But I at this point never really grab just this palette for a look, and it doesn't really excite me. I think that's what it is. I think it's a nice palette. There's really nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't excite me. It doesn't get me going, ooh, and start percolating all these different ideas. It just doesn't have that effect. I have paired it already with the Age of Opulence and I get a beautiful look. But I could take Age of Opulence and pair that with many other palettes in my collection and get equally or possibly more beautiful looks. So I like this palette. I don't really have anything bad to say about it. A couple of critiques, but I currently do have it listed for sale because it's just not quite there. So if I had to declutter one from Beauty Bay, it would be Love Notes. And there you go, that's my video. And if I had to declutter one palette from each brand, some of these would be really, really hard to part with. For example, the Amori Mariposas palette. But a couple of them be like, yeah, that's okay. You know, I have those colors or something very similar represented elsewhere in my collection, generally in palettes that have more options that I love. So yeah, thank you very much for hanging out with me today. I hope you liked the video. Remember to check out this eyeshadow look and like and subscribe if you want to see more content. And until I see you again in my next video, I hope you have a lovely day. Bye. If I had to declutter, what did I have? Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going through palettes that would... Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about if I had to declutter... Hello, welcome back to...